When you recruit for leadership roles, the price of making a mistake is so much higher for the company. It'll be years before we're able to undo that.
Did you enjoy the process though?
So I felt x-rayed.
Like an interrogation.
I get many more CVs and interest than we can handle.
Do you think this is a problem specifically within the Middle East?
Here, because it's a sign of weakness, culturally speaking, you're not supposed to show vulnerability really, and you don't feel a sense of roots. Everything is linked to your employer.
You're in survival mode pretty
Yes.
much all the time.
All the time.
Is this a fight worth fighting from your perspective, or? My guest today is Fareeseh Chaudhry, someone I've known for some time, but more importantly, someone with a wealth of experience with some of the world's largest FMCG and consumer healthcare companies. Fareeseh is an expert when it comes to assessing talent, but more importantly, she's an expert in understanding who has leadership skills and who doesn't. How would you describe the Middle East job market today?
From the outside, I think it's very aspirational. A lot of people want to be here. I think that's increased over the 6 years that I've been here. The desire to be in the Middle East has gone up. I think as a job market, in pockets, it's thriving. And in pockets, it's saturated. So it depends on the industry. But overall, it's an exciting place to be. There's a lot of growth in these markets. There's a lot of movement of talent, of businesses coming into these markets. So it makes it a really good place to be. But yeah, it depends. If you're lucky enough to be in an industry that's not saturated at this point in time, you'll get a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
But also for an outsider, it's hard to crack into this market. If your company transfers you, I think that's probably the easiest way for people to get to the Middle East today. Internal transfers. But there are so many people I constantly speak with who want to be here. But if you don't have a foothold or you don't have a referral, it can be really hard.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of people economics, there's more people looking for work than there are roles.
Yes.
But then it also comes down to appetite. So you would have, played a pivotal role in all the organizations you've worked with when it comes to strategy around hiring, but more importantly, the assessment of leadership.
Yeah.
Would you say there is an appetite for big corporate to look at people outside of the market and outside of the company to bring a fresh perspective?
I think, again, depends on the company. I've had varied experiences. So my first big experience here in the Middle East was with Procter & Gamble, and they're a purely grow from within organization. So that by definition was a different experience. They were bringing in people within the first 3 to 5 years maximum of anyone's career. And after that, it was all grow from within. There, it was all about attracting internal talent and, having them come to the Middle East. And I think sometimes that there was bias, you had to do a little bit of convincing, but eventually as Dubai became a sizable headquarter, you had enough people who'd been here from different markets and there was enough recognition that this is a really good place to work. But that was different. For the other two companies attracting for leadership roles has actually, so I worked for Lipton Teas and Infusions and I'm currently with Haleon. I think attracting people for leadership roles has been pretty easy.
Pretty easy?
The problem, I think, has been of getting the hiring right. Because when you recruit for leadership roles, I always find that the price of making a mistake is so much higher for the company. If we don't get that recruitment right, it'll be years before we're able to undo that. So I think it's more the pressure, but we have been spoiled for choice in terms of people wanting to be here. We are getting a lot of interest on even internal moves. But externally, I get many more CVs and interest than we can handle.
Would you say then that the internal mobility piece is the priority for any organization?
Yeah.
Even if a refresh, a rechange, a different perspective is needed?
I think internal mobility is a priority because you must give people a sense and the opportunity to grow. So if you're constantly only bringing in external talent, then I think you're giving a clear message to the ones that you have that you may be good for what you're doing today, but we don't see you as having the skill set to do what's needed for the future. so you need to invest a little bit also in developing and nurturing talent where you see potential so that they are ready to step into leadership roles, while at the same time being very clear on where are your strategic resourcing choices and where are you going to deliberately bring in external talent because it's critical, because that fresh perspective is necessary.
And that choice is based on fresh perspective,
Yes.
or the fact that the company doesn't have the right succession plans in those particular areas.
Two things. As Haleon separated into a fast-moving consumer health company, every over-the-counter, so directly accessible to consumers, it had to shed a lot of its pharmaceutical industry mindset. Part of that comes with bringing in talents and leaders who have worked in consumer goods industries or different industries, so they come with a different mindset. That's part of the reason for change. But in a few cases, it will be where we do not have good succession internally, and we will look to bring in strong talent from the outside.
Okay. So what is the role then that you play when it comes to building the strategy around hiring?
So step one, I think what's the purpose of the talent strategy overall? It is to make sure that we have the right set of skills and capabilities in the organization to deliver what is a very, very ambitious growth plan for the business in Middle East Africa. So if that's what my goal is, then working back from that, it comes down to, do I have those capabilities in the organization today? And that is what is then determining where we make a choice to bring in external talents, and where we have the ability to nurture it within the company.
In that case, would you say that the expectations in terms of leadership skill set are the same as they were 5-10 years ago, or do you think they have also evolved as the market and industries and technology have evolved?
I definitely think leadership skills have evolved and the expectations from leaders have evolved. I think there is the fact that you must be, so let's start with, you must be somebody who's able to flex their style is much more evident today than it used to be earlier. It's not okay to just have one size fits all kind of approach, because you are managing diverse people. There's a recognition and appreciation for people's needs being very diverse. So that's one shift. Then I think on top of all the good stuff of strategic thinking, of learning agility, of having the drive to succeed, all those are foundational and have been around for a while. But I think the flexibility of your style in terms of being able to lead and inspire, and then being really plugged into external trends as they change, especially around technology, especially around what that means when you hire people who are digital natives. You know, leaders are expected to know this, but they're 20, 30 years
there's a lot of extracurricular work they're doing in the background, trying to stay ahead of their own kids, probably, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I think there's an expectation that you know, right? How can you lead if you don't know what the latest trends are, and at least you're some degree of comfort in that. So that's new. And then the space around kindness or resilience or all those softer skills that were a bit of a like a fine print of leadership once upon a time. I think that's not there. The truly successful people know how to balance the drive also with recognizing that people have different needs, and how can you be soft when you're needed to be.
See, I think there's a big balancing act between technical and commercial results, and then obviously the human skills that we look for. But I'm going to go back to leadership first of all. So I know that when I speak to people, their own views on their leadership capabilities are very subjective. If I'm hiring, how do I remove subjectivity from this assessment, and what types of tools would you use, or what skills have you developed over the years that allow you to work out who's talking a good game and who's talking BS?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I was recently doing interviews for a very senior position, and that's why it's just top of mind for me. But it was amazing how low self-awareness can be at times, and how people will come in thinking that they are God's gift to this company or this role, and they are absolutely it. And it's not that they've not done good things in their career. So as you talk to them and as you build that, get into their experience and have them share their life story with you, I think you have to listen for the real why behind the story that they're telling you. And I always think that, okay, so once you start telling me about a particular project or you start a particular assignment that was very difficult and where you achieved a lot, I like that second layer of questions where I start digging into, okay, the context, or why did you even accept this? What made you do this? And eventually, I think people can't hide the truth of what's really the reason why they got there. So it's about doing an interview or recruiting in a way where you really are trying to get to know the person. And then you start seeing the real, the way their brain clicks.
The how
way,
and the
yes,
why.
the how and the why and how they balance it. And then it's much easier to make a call. And I also find that people who have done zero self-reflection or very little self-reflection on how I could be better is always the tell. Because the strongest leaders are not the flashiest leaders, but they are the ones who give enough time to, what do I not know? This job I'm applying for, I'm maybe very good, but there are things I don't know, and I'm thinking about how do I fill that gap. I have that worry, for example. I have that recognition that
But I have the solution at the same time of
Yes.
how I will build up that capability.
So they're brainstorming with you, perhaps in an interview almost, but they're not shying away from saying, here's what I bring to the table, but at the same time, here's where I'm thinking I will need to build, and this is my plan for building this gap. Because then you're talking to someone who has self-awareness, who recognizes they're in for a big job, and at the same time are ambitious to be really good at it.
Do you think this is a problem specifically within the Middle East, or do you think this is a problem across this level of leadership globally?
It's more here. So I've worked in 3 different locations within Europe. I worked in Pakistan when I started my career, and here. I do think that here, because it's a sign of weakness, culturally speaking, you're not supposed to show vulnerability really. You're supposed to be in command and in control. There's a lot of that hierarchical thinking that's ingrained in these cultures. And I think that's why it's hard to admit that, oh, here's something I feel unsure about.
Yeah.
And I think you have to unlearn that cultural training to be able to have those honest conversations. I found a lot more willingness to have those open conversations within my European colleagues. And I guess that those are, cultures that make it okay for you to say that I know this, but I need to build this knowledge. At the same time, whenever I've interviewed external talent that's worked in different locations, so coming from this part of the world, but having worked in different places, you can see the change. You can see the fact that if they've lived and worked long enough in different cultures, it definitely makes you more aware of...
I agree with you 100%. If I was to summarize, it's not just cultural, but I also think it's how the region is viewed as a performance market. It's very transient. It's very results focused. I mean, I know companies globally are results focused, but here there seems to be this bullet that gets fired at you when you start.
Yeah.
You just don't know when it's going to hit you.
Yes.
And I think the pressure that builds makes people oversell and under realize that weakness and self-awareness are probably and vulnerability.
Yeah.
Good companies want to see that because then they know what they can work with.
That is very fair, because when I first moved here in 2019, I had been with P&G for, I guess, 19 years then. And I moved here, and after having worked for 12 years in different European locations and Pakistan before that. So it's the first time in my career that things were going well. I was in a great job, feedback, reviews, everything was fine. But I started feeling this sense of nervousness because when I came here, a lot of my old college friends who were already in Dubai were suffering from the slump that had happened in 2018, 2019, especially in the financial sector. So many of them had lost their jobs and were looking or had to move to different places outside Dubai. Many were fearing for their jobs. So the general culture was of so much fear because you didn't know what would impact your job. And I realized here, this is transient and you don't feel a sense of roots. Everything is linked to your employer.
You're in survival mode pretty much all the time.
All the time. And that in itself is an unhealthy state of mind.
Yeah.
And that's the one definite weakness of here.
But this then leans into the age that we're in today. So recruitment has always been a human-to-human process.
Yeah.
Now we have AI, automation. My first question to you is this something that you are considering and looking into for your own processes, your own strategy, your own refinement?
So what I've realized is that Haleon was already really at that verge of automating even further some of the recruitment processes that can take the process system steps and make them easier for both the recruiters inside the company, as well as the candidate on the other side of the screen, because there are things that don't need to wait for phone calls and chasing people, etc. And if you can have some amount of automated or digital help that helps both hiring managers screen faster, candidates receive update faster, recruiters kind of do their piece of the work faster, that's more efficient. But I think that the whole point is that is not why people join, and that at the end of the day is just a ease of process point for me.
It's a substitution for something else, just to give you that optimization, the speed. And
like the system that we've recently launched in the company that helps with the screening process and managing candidate files and all of that is intended to make that faster and simpler, but it's not intended to replace candidate experience in any way. So once they get to that screening stage of the first meeting with the recruiter, I think how our internal recruiters have that meetings has a lot to do with whether they're interested in having that second conversation with us.
Yeah.
Because everybody knew the big pharmaceutical names before Haleon became Haleon, but nobody knew Haleon in 2022. So there's a lot of employer branding work that has gone on. And I think what we still have a long way to go there. So it's actually that recruiter who actually has that first interaction and convinces someone that we're someone you'd want to be interested in, and here are our brands, and this is what we do. So I always think that the human touch will remain paramount, but the systems make life faster and more efficient.
Do you believe that it will always continue to be a heavily human-dominated process? Or do you think that people will become more and more open-minded to having assessments with chatbots and agents and things like that, which you can then use AI to rank based on response or preference?
To some extent, yes, where you don't create a feeling of unfairness, because it depends on what is it that you're asking. If there are questions that dig into the person's background in terms of education, some experiences, work permits, legality around where they are, etc. I think those are things that you will not give a candidate a sense that they are being unfairly judged on something, and those are fact-based. I think you get to a point where people have unique things to bring to the table or unique circumstances. And I think that's where it's important that people don't feel like they're being screened out by a machine. And so it's a strange balance, but we have to find it somehow. And I don't have all the answers on that.
No, and neither do I. But I know that the sophistication of this technology is getting better and better and better.
Yes.
That it almost becomes difficult to know whether or not you're talking to somebody, or you're talking to a.
But to give you an idea of what is probably our most important step in leadership recruiting today for Haleon, it's purely based on human interaction. So when we get to a particular point where we've done a couple of screening interviews, and I'm talking about roles that are either country head roles or functional leadership at a regional level, then we end up referring them to an external partner who does a complete leadership assessment for us. And that leadership assessment is about understanding someone's motivation, drive, judgment skills, etc. So really, how will they be in this role?
Yeah.
And that happens through a 4-hour interview, behavioral, psychological interview with the candidate. And I think by the time our assessors get done spending those 4 hours, there's really nothing they don't know about the person. And there's not much you can hide. And I was at the receiving end of one of those interviews.
Yeah, of course, because you're only within your first year as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I felt more seen than I've ever been seen before.
Did you enjoy the process though?
I did enjoy the process. The person I was speaking to was actually a lovely speaking experience, but he was very, very knowledgeable about how to dig into someone's psyche or how to pick up on a particular word they've just mentioned casually in a conversation, because he was talking to me about my life. And then he would pick up a word and want to dig into it. And it would always be something that had a story that was important to me, whether difficult or emotional or something that was foundational to how I became who I became and why I do what I do. So he was very, very good at his job. So I felt X-rayed.
Like an interrogation.
Yes, but in a good way. It
Yeah.
was, and then of course it comes with, for the candidate, whether they get selected or not, it comes with coaching at the end, like a couple of weeks later, on what the coach had observed and tips for their future career. So
This is interesting because obviously there are some companies that use these. It could be assessments or psychometric diagnostics, whatever it might be, to complement the process.
yes,
Some use it to veto as well.
Yeah.
They really look at it quite heavily and go, no. Although we love this person,
Yeah.
the results say no. What's your view?
so once in a while we have used it to differentiate candidates and say who we will proceed with.
Okay.
Many times by the time we get there, we're very certain that this is a strong candidate that we found. And the assessment is designed maybe to reaffirm our thinking as well, but also to find out how to best support this candidate if they get selected in the role, because
Yeah.
that's the real win there. So that we build the onboarding program and the support system in exactly the way that will set this person up for success.
Do you believe that companies are prepared or give a degree of allowance for not finding the perfect candidate? And if I may add, prepared to take a risk on hiring?
In terms of betting on someone who may not be 100% right fit?
Yes.
Okay, second question, let me answer that first. I think the bet depends on how critical the business situation is at that point in time. So if you have a senior, let's say a country leadership role for any company, any country that we're hiring for, but you have a very strong general manager, you have a strong team in other functions, then in one particular function where the general manager probably has the insight or previous experience to support, you could take a chance on someone who's not necessarily you're not necessarily sure is the best fit at this point in time, or maybe they have a learning gap, etc. But if your business situation is really critical, where you need someone who will be up and running from day one, then I think you will not take the risk because especially in transformation, I don't think people or leaders have also bandwidth to support with a lot of onboarding and coaching. So many times you're looking for someone who will be really ready and knows how to do that job already and will be off and running from the first day.
There isn't an appetite necessarily for hiring managers to invest their time,
Yeah.
primarily because this is a transient region. You don't have the same kind of longevity of career that you used to.
You don't bring in Dubai, I don't see people bringing in early career hires.
No. And actually, yes and no. Because if I go back to something that you were talking about as well, which is employer branding, if we then look at the balance of human skills, technical skills, and then we assess the risk versus the certainty, how do you create a culture that supports a multi-generational workforce where all of these factors are in play for every part of that spectrum?
That's okay. So I think that's an ideal state where you would have the breadth of employees who the younger generations, the ones who come straight out of college, a couple of years at best of experience, and then you have the senior leaders. But the problem is, I don't think companies have an appetite in a region this expensive to necessarily bring in talent a lot at the junior levels, whereas all organizations have certain jobs that sit at that level. But I think the balance is definitely off. I find not just Haleon, but many companies make a choice that if you don't have a tax risk and certain operational jobs can be done from other markets, which are lower cost markets, they will put operational centers or hubs or those kind of jobs in other places. So Dubai or Middle East in general ends up being places where you have few jobs that are either administrative or junior in terms of scope. Most jobs tend to be middle to senior management at minimum. So the triangle is a little inverted.
But you've also worked for organizations that are very big on management traineeships and graduate traineeships.
Yes.
So not necessarily, we're still talking high quality, high value, high skill set based roles, but just at a junior level.
Yeah.
Which model works best for this region then? The P&G model or the Haleon model?
I think that answer depends on the company and what their philosophy of recruiting is. I think the truth of this region is the second model. Most people don't want to invest overly at the lower roles, and I actually think it's a shame. I do not agree with that because, like I said, my version of what makes for a healthy organizational balance is to have roles that sit across all levels of grades, all levels of experience, because then the conversation is so much more diverse. You're not leaders talking to leaders only.
Yeah.
That's a very skewed perspective on how to make decisions. And I think that's the danger of companies that only put middle to senior management roles in a place because it's expensive.
Especially a consumer business.
Yes.
Because you'll end up losing half, you're not sure what half of your audience are actually thinking or doing.
Yes. And you're not in touch with how things are going. So at Haleon, I find that it's a better, it's definitely a better balance, but it's still the skew is still there.
Okay.
And over time, if we could, we should find a way to also put more operational roles here. But it's always that cost challenge that companies have here.
Is this a fight worth fighting from your perspective, or?
It depends if the local business is growing. I think it's very hard to have these theoretical debates if you've got a business that's not growing. And luckily for us, our Gulf Near East sector is definitely a growing cluster for us. As it grows, hopefully, I think it'll give us much more ability to put roles at all levels there, because that's where the need is. A lot of times as the business grows, it's your operational needs that increase. It's not necessarily that just because you've added 10% more turnover, you need 2 GMs. You do not. But it's the operational roles that should increase. And we do have a plan to invest there because that's where the need will be.
Okay, perfect. I really enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. For more episodes on ChatGRG, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. See you next time.